Hello, and welcome to this demonstration of the CoolSpools commands needed to import data from XML documents to your IBM I database. So the import of data from XML documents is a three-step process involving three distinct CoolSpools commands. The first command, BLDXMLDBF, uses a sample XML document to build an empty map containing the XML structure. You can then populate that XML structure with the required database mappings using WRKXMLDBF. And this allows you to specify which database tables and fields each element and attribute within the XML structure maps to. Creating and configuring the map may be a one-off process which you don't need to return to unless you need to refine the mapping in some way. However, the third command in the process is IMPXMLDBF, and this is the runtime command that you use to import data from XML documents using the map that you created with the first two steps. Now let's look at an example. When we run BLDXMLDBF, it inspects the contents of an XML document, such as this one, and builds the empty skeleton of the map based on the structure of the XML document. In this case, the XML document is a simple customer listing, which has a customer element with an ID, a number of sub-elements under the customer, and a repeating contact element with contact details for each customer. When we run BLDXMLDBF, that will create the map with the customer ID, customer name, contact and contact name elements, but without any mapping to our IBM I database. We can now use the WRKXMLDBF command to start populating the empty map with the database mapping details. This tells CoolSpools how each of the elements and attributes maps into the database. So whenever we encounter a customer element, that tells CoolSpools that we need to add a record to the database table CU master. The ID attribute maps to our customer ID field, and the various sub-elements of customer map to other database fields within the customer master table. We also need to set up a similar mapping for the customer contact fields, populating the customer contact database table. Now that we have created our map, we can run the IMPXMLDBF command to import the data from multiple XML documents to our database table using the map to identify which database tables and fields are to be populated. Let's log on to our IBM I server in order to see those commands in action. First, let's look at our sample XML document /home/demo/demo.xml. And you'll notice that this is the same customer listing XML document that we saw earlier. You'll notice that the XML document includes carriage returns and indenting. That's not necessary for CoolSpools. It's only there to aid in the readability of the document. CoolSpools will be able to interpret any valid XML document. Next, let's look at the CoolSpools commands. If you don't remember the names of the commands, don't worry, you can access them via the CoolSpools menu. Run Go Cool menu, then select option 5 for database, and from the database menu, option 23 to work with the import of XML data. The three menu options that are displayed correspond to the three commands that we mentioned earlier. And the first command that we need to run is option 1, BLDXMLDBF. The command requires two parameters. The first is the name of the sample XML document, in our case /home/demo demo.xml. And secondly, we need the name of the map that we're going to create. This is an arbitrary name. In this case, we'll just call it demo. And we press enter, and CoolSpools has now created the empty map. We can then start to populate the map with the database mappings by taking option 2, which is command WRKXMLDBF. We can see our empty map demo in the list, and we can use option 8 to drill down through the different levels of elements within the structure. So we can see XML, customer list, customer, and then underneath the customer are the various data elements and also the contacts section. And if we drill down there, we can see the contact data elements as well. Now let's press F12 to come back through the structure to the customer element, and we'll start to add our database mapping. If we enter option 2, we can enter the database mapping for the customer element, and what we want CoolSpools to do is to add a record to our customer master table every time one of the customer elements is encountered. So here, because we're writing a record, we're using option R, and then we need to put in the name of our customer master database file. Because we're writing a record that rather than mapping to a database field, we can change the field name to *none. And then we press enter, and now CoolSpools knows that it needs to write a record to the customer master file for each customer element in our XML. Next, we can use option 9 to see the attributes of the customer element, and the attribute named ID can also be changed with option 2 to add mapping information. And this time we want to use option D to apply data. And the data we want to apply is to update the field which is named cust ID. You'll notice that the database table name has been defaulted for us. We want this to be saved as a numeric data type, and then we press enter to save. Now we can F12 back to the customer and then use option 8 to drill down to its elements. And we can do the same as we did with the ID attribute, enter option 2 to enter the database mapping, and then specify the database field name and the option D to tell CoolSpools that this is mapping fields data. So here we're mapping the customer name, so we enter the field name, cust name, and specify that this is an alphanumeric value. And we'll just go through and repeat that process for each of the other elements at the customer level. Now that we've populated the mapping for each of those elements, let's update the contact level mappings. So we're going to apply a database map for contact, and this time we need to run option R because we're writing a record to our contact database file whenever we encounter the contact element. And if we drill down with option 8 to see its elements, then we want to add a mapping to each of those, populating fields within the customer contact table. Now, if we leave the field name as its default value, select, when we press enter, CoolSpools will present us with a list of the database fields within that file. So rather than having to remember the field names, we can just select them from the list, and this will also automatically populate the database field type. If we repeat that for the second element, so the email, again, we'll select the name. And what you may have noticed is that there was also a customer ID in our contact file, but our XML document doesn't contain a customer ID at the contact level. We can work around that, though, by adding an additional virtual element to our mapping So we press F6 to add a new element. We'll give it a name of customer ID, and we'll tell CoolSpools where the customer ID needs to map to within the database. So it's going to the cust ID field. But at this point, that customer ID element is not being populated from anywhere. So we need to take option 6 in order to link it to another element within the map. So we take option 6 and press enter. And then we press F6 to add the link to the other element within our map. And we can drill down through the structure starting at XML, take option 8, customer list, option 8 again to customer, and then option 9 to see customers' attributes. And we want to select the ID at the customer level. And now CoolSpools knows that the customer ID at the contact level is being populated from the attribute ID at the customer level. So we've now finished defining our map. We can come out of the map, and we could run this using the third menu option, which is the IMPXMLDBF command. If we prompt that, you can see that we need to specify the name of the XML document to import and the name of the map that we're using in order to run the conversion. But actually, you would usually run this command from a CL program or run it in some way, because this is a regular, repeated, scheduled process. So here's a simple CL program that just clears the 2 database files that we're loading the data into, and then runs the IMPXMLDBF command. In this case, we've hard-coded the name of the document, but that could easily be a variable, and we've specified the name of our map. And after running that CL program, you can see that our database file has been populated with customer data. So we've got the 4 customers that were in the XML document, and our contacts table has also been populated with all of the contacts data from the XML document, including that ID that's come from the customer level. Now, if we return to the WRKXMLDBF command, there are a couple of options that we skipped over earlier that may be worth seeing. Option 6 prints the definition of the map, and this provides you with a useful report of the structure of XML and how it maps to your database. There are also options to save and restore your map, and this can be particularly helpful if you define your maps on a development or test server and later need to save and restore them as is onto your production server. I hope that this has been a useful introduction to the XML import capabilities of CoolSpools. You can find more information on the commands you've seen in this video and the rest of the CoolSpools application at our website, www.coolspools.com.